Working on how to do a fake action blur. So whether it's a fake panning or a fake motion blur, it's pretty much the same steps, and I'll get started here. So you find your image you want, and I would just recommend a stop action picture. Here's one I just found off the internet that's lovely. Nice side to side movement. One problem a lot of people have with this is they try to get a picture where the object's running straight at us, and that's a lot harder. You want more of a side to side movement. So typically you'll have your layer locked like this as your background layer. First thing I would do is just hold Option, double click on that, and that will unlock it. And then if you hold down Control, I like to duplicate it. So I have two of them, and that just protects that background layer. And then from there, you're going to mask. And so I'm going to turn the very background layer off, and you're not going to see anything happen because I've got the top one on. And then I put a mask on that top layer. I grab my paintbrush, paint with black, my opacity's up, make my brush a little bit bigger, and I'm just going to start painting out everything but the object I want to pan or motion blur with. And so I'm just going to kind of do this roughly here at first. And then I'm going to decrease the size of my brush. And feel free to skip ahead here if you don't want to watch me do this, but I'm going to leave it in the video in case there are people who want to see how I do it. just need to go cut out the big pieces. All right, the hard part is done. And from here, the picture should still look normal if I turn that background layer on, even though I have two. And so now what I do is if I hold down the Command key, it's right next to the spacebar. I hold down that Command key and I click on the mask. You'll see when I hover my mouse over the mask, it gives me that marquee symbol. And what that's going to do is it's going to load my picture as a selection. And so now I could copy and paste this. And right now if I copy and paste, watch what happens. It pastes the mask. And you can see all my little choppy paint up marks, whatever. So that's not what I want. I want to click, so I load the selection, I hold Command, I click on the mask, and then I have to, over on the layers bar, I click on the picture, I copy and paste that, and now I have Mr. Lynch here on a separate picture. And oops, I missed this little section. I'll get my eraser tool. Paint that bugger out. And so I'm going to put him back to where he was, and it should snap into place there. And so now I have a couple options. One, I can just duplicate this background layer again. And I can go Filter. Whoops, it's locked. Filter, Blur, Motion Blur. And I set the angle he's running at. So he's running, to me it looks like he's running at us and like kind of down to the left a little bit. Probably something like that. And so I can do a fake panning like this. Now I've got a couple areas I still have some problems. One thing I could do would be to turn this layer off in a second here. You'll see. But if I go like that, and then I turn this one off, maybe move this one over here a little bit. And so right now this is kind of bothering me, that edge. So I could even put a mask on here and just lower my opacity and then fade this out a bit. And that'll make it look a little more realistic. I missed a few chunks as well. So that's a fake panning there, and it looks pretty good. If you can really play with it, and if you look at a real panning, and you can kind of learn from it and see what else needs to be blurred, I'm pretty good at picking them out on the internet and finding which ones are fake and which ones are real. Another thing you could do from here would be to warp it. So I'd have to where is it? Combine those two layers there. And you can come back in and warp this. And it looks like I still messed it up there. I need to flatten that. But I can bend him a little bit, make him look like he's coming out of the background. Anyways, next little one here is to just blend or blur him. And so I would go Filter, blur, motion blur. And then hit OK. And I'll drag this up on top. Oh, wrong one. That's from the last one. Drag that one up on top. And then take this one, kind of move it behind him here. And this is one that looks even better warped. So I'm going to take this and kind of twist it back and make it look like he's coming from the background a little bit more. And then another thing I like to do on this one is, if I'm just doing a regular motion blur, is I like to increase the contrast on this, lock it down, and make that stand out a little bit more. And then I also like to fade the back edge of him, so it blends in to the blur more back here. You can keep playing around with it, but there's a fake motion blur, and then you also have the fake panning. And so that just comes from masking and the filter blur motion blur tool.